Hide it. Okay. We are live on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. Oh, Facebook says it does not. Okay, something went wrong with the Facebook. No point, Agent. No point stressing about it, guys. So this is my weekly feedback Q&A live stream and podcast host. This week's episode is slightly different than previous ones. Typically, I discuss everything around feedback conversation, how to create a healthier feedback culture, and how to get better at feedback as a whole, not just providing feedback, but receiving and requesting as well. Today, I'll be sharing with you my personal journey with growth mindset. I haven't done it yet. It's the first time that I'm doing so, which I'm really excited about it. And I'll be sharing with you how I developed and discovered growth mindset at the age of 16, how it helped me become a successful athlete, how it helped me to become I hope, great leader, manager, and how I'm using it still today with building my business, setting up my podcast, and really enjoying a life when my mindset is resilient and I'm excited when I'm facing challenges. So that will be, guys, today. What I'll do is first I'll talk through how I've discovered it as an athlete. Then I'll explain what my philosophy of David and Goliath means to me and how it helps me develop my resilience. I'll be talking about the concept of coaching playground and the athlete-like mindset as well, how I developed it and how I frame it, how it helps me. I'll also be sharing with you how I'm competing with Simon Sinek every single day. And what does it mean to me? And how it helps me chase my goals, my passion, and my dream. Now, as I mentioned, it's the first time that I'm doing so. So I've got a bunch of notes in here. I'm not using any slides. So excuse me if I'm referring back to them. I just want to make sure that I am on track with it. Now, if you're watching it live, I appreciate you streaming in, joining in. And perhaps you're facing your own challenges, goals that you want to accomplish, but you're not necessarily sure or you're not entirely sure if you should go after them and how to tackle them, because perhaps you don't have the skill sets just yet to do so, or the environment around you isn't as supportive as it should be. There are not enough people that are lifting you up. Believe me, I've been there as well, and I had to come up with my own ways of... Oh, hold on, something... Facebook is now fixed and it's working. Awesome. I had to come up with my own ways and mental frameworks to achieve exactly that. Very quickly, what growth mindset is to me. Now, growth mindset is a ways of being, thinking, and living that allows you to see yourself not as a ready product, as your abilities are not fixed, meaning, well, I'm not good at it and I won't really improve at it. It's a ways of living and being where you see every failure as an opportunity to grow and improve. Everything that we do helps us improve and move forward. And for me personally, it helps me come against a challenge. Every single challenge that's being thrown at me in my life, professional, personal life, I just look at it with a smile on my face and I'm excited about it. I'll explain why that is. So for me, growth mindset is about looking at every single life experience and finding lessons in it in order to improve and grow further. So when did I experience and when did I explore experience growth mindset? At age of 16, guys, I started doing wrestling, freestyle wrestling at age of 10. And I wasn't particularly good at it. It was my ways of escaping from my day-to-day routine and reality. And I just joined a wrestling club. Gary, what have you achieved in life to inspire me? Well, we'll see. Well, I'll start with my athlete career as a freestyle wrestler. So, as I mentioned, Gary, I've joined in a wrestling club, freestyle wrestling club, as a 10-year-old kid, and I wasn't particularly good. In the regional level, yes, I was doing okay. On the national, I was nowhere near where an athlete should be. And at some point, one of my friends, a little bit older friend, Cornell, stronger, faster, better wrestler, joined the senior team, and he was really growing fast as a wrestler. So I started to look at his practices and I asked him for a favor. I went to Cornell one day and I said, hey, Cornell, could you wrestle me every single day for 5 to 10 minutes before you start your practice? All I want is to score 1 point. Now, if you're not into the wrestling, then imagine a boxer who's facing a better and stronger athlete, and his goal is just to land 1 punch. The gap between me and Cornell was huge, tremendous, in fact. But what I was hoping to achieve is to grow as a wrestler throughout that process. I wanted to improve as an athlete. Turned out I have discovered something more powerful, something that helps me today as a human being, as a professional, as a feedback coach, as a podcast host, as a parent. I've discovered the power of growth mindset. See, what I've learned at that particular time is that by facing every single day something that is bigger and stronger than me, in that particular case, Cornell, helps me develop my own skills and helps me grow from the process, although I had no chance of winning. So what I've learned is that I can compete against someone without being fixed on winning and yet benefiting from the process. Because typically, if we facing certain challenges and goals, we are obsessed with winning and being better. And if we fail, we tend to think about ourselves as we're not good enough and questioning ourselves. What I've learned instead with Cornell is that facing something that is bigger and better than me gets the best out of me. And I'm learning tremendously throughout the process. There are a few other things that I've learned. You see, I was competing with Cornell not to win, but to improve. And the more my mindset was focused on the process of growth and closing the gap, the more confident I became and the more enjoyable the whole process was. Because let's face it, for months, I was not even able to land a single point. But I wasn't discouraged because of that. And I still managed to find a lesson from it. So at that time, I already learned how to detach myself from the outcome of winning and focus on something else. In that particular case, number one, I felt really comfortable with the idea of closing the gap and improving every single day. But secondly, I've also discovered something very interesting, is by facing and fighting Cornell, who I had no chance to win against, helps me grow more. And so now I could help other wrestlers become a better athlete. And of course, as a result, I was becoming a better athlete. And around that time, within a year or so, I became one of the best wrestlers in my country. But that's not what I really appreciate the whole process for. What I really appreciate that experience, that coincidentally I've discovered this growth mindset, is the fact that I've seen and experienced something incredible. That by facing a bigger challenges, I mean, they don't have to be overwhelming, and I don't have to be afraid of them. And so from that point onwards, I started to putting myself always in a position of being a David facing down the Goliath. And even to today, so I'm 38 right now. That was when I was 16. For more than 20 years, I'm framing my life experiences and challenges, and I actually actively putting myself in a position where I am the David, the underdog, and I'm facing down the Goliath, something that is daunting, overwhelming, because that's when I get the best out of it. That's where I grow. But one possible downside from that would be, and is actually, without balancing it in the right way, is that for years, I'm putting myself in a position where I'm keep on losing, or I am not winning in that case. So if you play with me at football, we're going outside and play football, I enjoy being in a team that typically is a weaker one, doesn't have a bigger chance to win the game, because I know that's how I get the best out of myself, but I grow from the process. When I moved into the world of management, at some point I had to stop being an athlete. Freestyle wrestling isn't a football, doesn't pay the bills in the same way. I had to move into a working environment. So I thought to myself, well, I'm going to take everything that I've learned as an athlete into working environment. And very quickly I've learned that there are some differences, and I can't necessarily copy everything like for like, because I would fail otherwise. So let me just quickly read guys' comments. Okay, some interesting. Are you leveraging the Karate Kid switch off people? Not necessarily. I'm not sure what does that mean, Gary. Sorry, I'm not necessarily connecting the dots here. Okay, so guys, I've moved into the working environment. I thought, okay, how can I bring everything that I've learned as an athlete into management world, into becoming a better leader on the daily basis? So first thing that I've learned, there are some differences. Not everyone is like me, and not everyone is the same mindset that an athletes are. And I need to adjust. I need to adapt to that reality as well, because otherwise it was creating more damage than benefit, especially to others. I've learned after a few years that being the most competitive fella around isn't the best ways of conducting yourself, because it carries a very low empathy, and I had very little consideration for others, early 20s, late 20s as an employee in management world, guys. So what did I do in the working place is exactly what I'm doing right in the business one. So what I'll be doing now, guys, let me use two examples and I'll be referring in and out to them. Number one is the fact that I'm competing always with someone. And one of the person that I'm competing right now is Simon Sinek. So he's a great storyteller, and I'm competing with him in order to become a better storyteller. And number two, I'll be using my podcast as an example as well, because the whole process is very good representation of how can you put the growth mindset into action, guys. So Simon Sinek is one of my current Goliaths, for instance. And what does it mean to me is that I am competing with Simon in order to become a better storyteller. Now, here's the trick. I'm competing with him not to win, but to match his level of confidence and the way he shares storytelling. And it's really important, because early on, I was competing with the likes of Simon Sinek or others that I want to, in order to improve, I was competing with better managers, right? I brought this competitive nature into the mix. And what I realized very quickly is it has a downside. The reality is different than in the sporting environment. And it started created a mindset for me when it wasn't very healthy at all. Because let's look at that example of competing with Simon Sinek. If I want to compete with him, and if I frame everything in my mind as in I want to be just as good as him, or I want to be better than Simon Sinek with storytelling, the reality is the whole process will be very, very long. It's hard to even judge it whether I am at that level or not. And it's very easy to look down at your current level and think, well, I'm not as good as him. I can't do it just yet. I don't have as many stories as he does. He seems to be so confident with it, and I'm not. I'm not connecting the metaphors like he does with the learning points. And it would be very easy for me to knock out my own confidence. Instead, what I do in order to sustain my passion and sustain my drive and keep on competing with him every single day in order to grow myself as a speaker is I'm closing the gap, and my goal is to be as confident on the stage as Simon Sinek, not like Simon Sinek, not be like him, but be as confident, using as many metaphors, make them as short as possible in the future. And here's the important part: have the same impact that he has. And why it's a difference, what difference does it make to my own mindset? Is because if I chase the level of impact that he has with his storytelling, then I can very easily say, hey, I want to have the same level of impact in front of 3 to 4 people. I don't have to have it in front of thousands just yet. Because if I start matching myself with these huge stages that he's in front of, it's very easy for me to start thinking, well, he's so far ahead, I can't even reach him. The distance is overwhelming and can have the detrimental impact on my confidence. And so what I do is I say, hey, I want to close the gap every single day. When I see him talking and speaking, what do I learn from him? How can I become as confident as him? So it's not win-lose competition, it's closing the gap and be in the position where I can have the same level of impact on the audience as he has. Doesn't matter whether it's small one or huge one. Okay, this number is actually important here, because if I start fixating on I want to be in front of 10,000 people, which I want, that's my future goal as well. But if I still overly focus on that number, very easily I can look at my reality right now and think to myself, I'm not there yet, maybe I'm not good enough, and start questioning myself. So that's one thing that I do if I'm competing with someone like Simon Sinek. But I do that with everyone. I do that with everyday people that I meet as well. If somebody is really good listener or has this ways of being present with you, then I look at that person and think, how can I become that sort of person? What can I learn from this person? How can I compete in a way that I also become this person who is just as good listener as the other one? And what it also does, it allows me to compete with people without trying to undermining them in the process or trying to win by all means. All I'm doing is, if I see there is something great about you, I'm starting competing in a way that, how can I reach the same level of influence that you have right now? It's a different storytelling that creates in the process of it. And here's the huge part of growth mindset and any mindset that you develop for that matter, is the stories that you are telling yourself. It's how you are framing and reframing each experience as you are going through it. Let me just check my thing. So as we are, storytelling is the next point. So the storytelling that we are telling, that we are saying to ourselves, think about your own goal that you have and you want to achieve, or think about your failures that you've had in the past and how you frame them and how you've reframed them. Is really important, because it creates a certain mindset and takes you towards a certain action, and creates a certain motion and direction of your thoughts and the actions as well. Okay, so the cardinal sin here is repeating to yourself or looking at your current level of skills and attaching it to your identity. We tend to say something like, hey, I'm not good enough with this, I can't do that. Or like with my podcast, for instance. I've launched my podcast 9 months ago with zero experience. Like literally, I have never interviewed a single person in my life. Zero interviewing experience. I have never edited on audio. And I have to do that myself, right? I have very limited skills with editing videos. Prior to that, I had none as well. So it's very easy to have your own goal and say, well, I can't do that. I don't know how to do this. I'm not good at, etc., etc. I'm not good interviewer, or I'm not skilled at interviewing people. Therefore, I can't be a good podcaster. How you framing a current experience is important. What works for me really well is to look at it and communicate with myself in a way that I'm focused on the current skills right here, right now. Okay, so I'm not able to do that, and then I'm adding one more word. And one of the most powerful words, in my opinion, the most powerful 3-letter word that you can master repeating as often as possible in order to develop strong mindset, resilient mindset, is the word yet. So when I launched my podcast, I made a list of things that you have to learn. And instead of looking at it and thinking, oh, I don't know, or I can't edit audio, and I can't afford outsource it, I don't know how to interview people, I don't know how to ask questions, I don't know how to do this, that. Every single time I've added the word yet. So I don't know how to edit an audio yet. And what it does is, as soon as you say, I don't know how to edit it yet, it creates a mindset, it creates an action, sort of an action-based thoughts, if you will. That's how I like to view it. Rather than ruminating on lack of my abilities and perhaps even risking going down down the path of I'm not good and I should not do it even, should give up on it. Instead, I'm saying I don't know how to do it yet, so what I have to do in order to learn. So that's one of the most powerful ways, one of the most powerful tools that you can deploy as you're working on your own mindset. If you catch yourself thinking, I can't do that, then there are two things that you have to work on. First of all, the end goal is to not having those thoughts by default that I can't do that. We need to work on eradicating these ways of thinking that I can't, I don't know how. But if you are saying it, add that yet at the end of it. Okay? Majority of the time, when I make the mistake or I don't know how to do that, I immediately think, wow, okay, so how do I get better? What do I need to do? So I'm not asking myself why questions. It's more of a what and how. And that's another trick, because why are more likely going to put you into the mindset and the position where you're questioning yourself, you're not confident with yourself. It has a very negative connotation. Switching to questions what and how helps you have this curious mindset and go through learning process more effectively. So walk away from why and more what's and how's will help you with the process. David, totally agree with that and appreciate the way you spoke about reframing the conversation. Awesome, David. Thank you for stopping in and commenting. I will share a little bit. I've got a few more ways to share around that, how I reframe the conversations with myself as well, because that's the key here. The storytelling, guys, that we are repeating to ourselves and how we communicate with ourselves is an absolute key for everyone who is working on the mindset. Okay, whatever you're working towards, how you communicate with yourself will influence whether you succeed or not, whether you grow or not. The end goal with a growth mindset is to look at every failure and be excited and curious about the lesson that you've just learned. That's the end goal, but that's easier said than done. There are loads of ill advices or very generic advices that are actually not as valuable, because people tend to say, hey, don't worry about what others thinking about you, just do it. Yes, there is a part of that is true. That is the part of the goal. But that idea and that advice on its own, stop worrying about what people thinking about yourself, on its own can actually create more negative impact, has negative influence than positive on you. And I'll talk about it in a few minutes, guys, as well. Okay, so how we are framing the failures is really, really important. So here's an exercise for you guys. Whenever you find yourself not delivering to the results that you wanted, stay curious with your first initial thoughts. What's the story? What's the narrative behind? Okay, it's really important because you're going to pick up that narrative and follow through it. So here's an example what I mean by that. Last week, I've interviewed a hostage negotiator named Derek Gaunt. Big interview for me, like really important interview for myself. And as I was going to that interview, I went through my own routine. I was ready for it. I had my plan. I had my plan how to get the best out of this conversation. I was ready for it. I was absolutely ready. First few minutes of the interview, I've made a mistake that a year or two ago would absolutely knock my confidence on the ground. It was actually embarrassing. I was not able, he wrote a book, Ego, Failure, Authority. You see, again, I've said it wrongly. Ego, Authority, Failure is the book. And for some reason, as soon as I started the interview, I said the title of Derek's book wrongly twice. What a mistake, right? What a failure that is. You're interviewing someone and you can't even say the name of the book. A few years ago, I would just there and then lost it. I would be so harsh on myself. I couldn't get over this failure. And as a result, more likely, I wouldn't be able to conduct a really good interview and stay focused on the conversation. But you see, one thing that really helped me is accepting beforehand that I'm going to fail. And as soon as I started implementing that, my confidence went through the roof. My public speaking skills really significantly improved. Everything that I do carries, and I conduct that with more confidence, because the fact that you're obsessed with the end result and how people will perceive you, what they will think about you, and that creates the mindset that you don't want to fail, you don't want to do something wrong. And here's the thing, you'll mess up, you'll make a mistake. It doesn't matter how hard you try, how much you're prepared, how seasoned speaker you are, manager, leader, part, it doesn't really matter. Life is complex, emotions are complex, and you are going to make that mistake. So accepting in advance that I'm going into that interview and at some point, something will not go to the plan. I had this perfect question to ask and I will forget about it. In fact, I forgot about one question that I wanted to ask. It's really powerful because it helps you shake yourself away from this mistake, accepting that you're not perfect, you're not ideal, and move on. And the more stressed you are, the less smart you are. Your cognitive abilities are being diminished. So I've entered this conversation with Derek. I've made this mistake with his book once, twice. I turned it into a sort of joke. I shaked it off and moved on. A few years ago, I wouldn't be able to move on. Like if you worked with me years ago, you can reach out to Kid and he will tell you. If I made that one mistake during my speech, I didn't go according to my plan, according to my script that I had, or I didn't say the metaphor or the joke that I want and I thought is a brilliant one, you could see me visibly go, this is not what I want to say during the speech. As a result, I was more stressed and I wasn't able to perform to the best of my abilities. So number one, guys, accept that you're going to fail. Something will not go to the plan. It's impossible. So park that one away. Don't let it paralyze you and occupy your mind. And when it happens, it shakes off. Now, what's linked to that advice? Oh, hold on, there's a question. What would you say is the best way to communicate with others who have experienced failures but don't necessarily have this yet positive mentality? I'll go back to your question, Oliver, a bit later on. Really good question. Love it. What complements the fact that the first two things that I told you, the last two things that I told you, is that catch yourself saying, what if? So rather, when I go to the podcast interview, for instance, with a huge guest, somebody who you really look up to, and I've been fortunate to have a conversation with people that I really looking up to, my absolute heroes, the authors of those books that influenced my life significantly. And it is a bit overwhelming. And it's actually stressful because you want to do your very best. You speak with your lifetime heroes, right? Here's the thing. What helps me a lot is to communicate with myself that I don't ask myself, what if I fail? What if this happens? That sort of conversations do not happen anymore in my mind. Rather than what if, I'm accepting I'm going to fail at some point. Something will go wrong. Or I'm moving, instead of saying what if, I use sentences like I'm going to do that. So rather than thinking, what if this goes wrong? What if this goes wrong? And what if that happens? That's not how I think. How I think is, well, okay, I'm going to have a live stream and I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And when that happens, this is how I respond to it. I'm priming my mind and creating a backup plan almost, if you will. So again, catch yourself, communicating with yourself, do what if phrases, eradicate them, and move into I'm going to, I will do that. And when that happens, this is how I respond. It has this calming effect on your mind and creates a better positive mindset, especially during your performance, guys, okay? Another thing that really helps me, and this is something that I picked up relatively recently from a sports psychologist called Dan Abrahams. That's episode 11 of my podcast. And he talks about high-performing mindset. And what high-performing mindset is, it's about, in a nutshell, just check out the episode, a really powerful one, really, really good one. In a nutshell, what it means is there are things that are going to happen or goals that are obvious to you. Let's park them away, not to obsess about them because they can paralyze you, and focus on what you can control, and that's your thought process. That's the way you visual things, the way you frame things and reframe things. You can absolutely control that. There are things beyond your control, and if you focus too much on them, you get distracted. So in his world of sport, he talks about football player who's being obsessed with, I gotta score, right? Or I have to be really good host. I really have to ask right questions. And you're so focused on delivering that goal that it becomes to your detrimental, an obstacle to you. Instead, park that goal away and say, I'm going to be focused. I'm going to be sharp and alert during this conversation. I'm going to be as relaxed as I only can, rather than I have to ask this question. I have to deliver perfect presentation. I have to, motivate my people in front of them. I have to be the best possible speaker when I talk to them. Or I can't say and because they won't see me as confident. That will paralyze you, rather than focus on what you can control, on emotional state of yours, and framing it and reframing it ahead of the conversation or podcast interview. So before every podcast interview, and it doesn't matter who I'm talking with, what I tend to do is reminding myself in what emotional state I'm going to be. And I envision myself in that state. I'm going to be excited to speak with that person, rather than I need to be focused on asking the right questions. Okay, I've got it, I've done it, I've planned for it, it's there. I know I want to achieve it, but I don't think about it because I can just get stressed about it. So I'm going to be relaxed. I'm going to enjoy myself. It's a lot more powerful way when you're starting or when you're delivering something that is difficult for you to do so. What else? Coaching playground. I've mentioned, guys, that I'll be talking about a coaching playground. And as an athlete, what I've learned is that in the workplace as a managers, and typically older managers, we are not as deliberate with our development, personal development. We are not looking for opportunities to grow and learn. I've mentioned right at the beginning that growth mindset it's all about growing, and it's all about getting better. Now, here's the thing. Knowing it is one thing, executing on it is another thing. What are you looking at, and what are your learning opportunities are, and how it's connected to your cause and to the future self that you want to be? It's super important. Here's some examples. I'm sitting in my own room on my own. I don't work with a team. I don't have that many people to really provide me with the feedback, to challenge me, to motivate me, as I wish I had. As a manager, I had more people like that. But even then, not everyone is as willing to share the feedback with you, especially if you grow as a leader, as a manager, right? You have to find your own opportunities to practice to your craft, but also to practice your mindset. And my advice always is, look for those micro opportunities and then practice it at scale. And so what I mean by that is, when I'm editing my podcast episode, as an example, if I edit my podcast episode, this is my time to practice my growth mindset as well as editing skills, editing craft. So we tend to go, okay, I need to get better. I need to get better at editing episodes and cutting down the time that I'm doing and improving quality of my audio. Yes, absolutely. But don't just limit yourself to learn from this experience, this particular technical skills, because there is a lot more that you can learn from it. So the way I look at it, for instance, if I edit my episode, is I count how many, or I can hear how many I'm using. The end goal is to eradicate them, right? Remember at the beginning I've mentioned I'm competing with Simon Sinek. He doesn't stutter as much as we tend to do early, during our early public speaking careers, when you speak in front of people. And here's the thing, when it happens that I hear myself going, what's the story that I'm telling to myself? How do I view it? How do I frame it and reframe it? You see, there are a few possibilities here. I could listen to that and think, I'm still saying this, which I want to eradicate. So I'm still not as good as I want to be. That story are more likely, if I repeat myself that way, if I frame it that way, I'm more likely to be overwhelmed and give up with the with the process. What I do instead is I say, oh, wow, I'm using less of those feeling words, right? So rather than focusing on I'm still doing it, or I am not as good as Simon, or I'm nowhere near as Simon Sinek is, or my ideal public speaker or podcast host, what I'm saying to myself is, all right, I'm saying less, I'm repeating it less, therefore I'm growing and improving. So the future me is ready to be on that stage and repeat it even less times. Or I'm repeating it less right now. So right now, if I go on the stage, my impact is already better than it was a month ago. So this is the impact that I'm aiming for, a Simon Sinek-like level. 6 months ago, I was here. I've edited several podcast episodes. I've limited significantly my filler words. And so the story in my head is, if I'm on the stage today, I'm closer to the impact that Simon has. Okay? It's not attached to my identity. It's not attached to who I am as a public speaker, as a podcast host. It's attached to my ability and current state. And that helps me to really be curious with the process rather than bashing myself like why I can't do that just yet, or I keep on doing the same mistake over and over. I'm not good enough. We don't want that, right? We want to be more confident with the whole process. So what are your coaching opportunities? You'll be stunned once you look at it that way. Emailing, how you send the emails, like incredibly important. So imagine your goal, my goal for this year is to ask a lot more open-ended questions, not asking binary questions. And sending an email is a perfect coaching playground for me. It's not just an email. I can actually read it and see how I'm asking questions, how I'm responding back to it. So you've got opportunities left, right, and center if you frame them as your coaching playground, guys, okay? One thing that also helps me, and I hope I can convey that message very clearly, guys. One thing that helps me be the best version of myself and deliver the best possible performance in a particular time is by attaching my failures and lesson into emotional state almost. So if I'm working on something and I feel like I'm not moving in the right pace and I'm not improving strong enough, I'm focusing and I'm reminding myself, why am I doing it? But there's a caveat to that. When you keep on working on something and you remind yourself, well, I'm doing it because I want to do X and Y. I want to be a public speaker. I want to be a coach. I want to be a great leader, great parent. It's the right thing to do. Absolutely. You've got your goal. You set them yourselves. Those goals are there. But I'm fairly sure the reason why you do or why you want to achieve something is because you've already experienced it. You remember that emotional feeling, that emotions and the emotional state when you've done something, and now you want more of it and you want to scale it. For instance, the reason why I want to be a public speaker and coach is because in the past I felt great when I could contribute to someone else's growth. If I could help that one wrestler become a better wrestler, that one person becoming a better person in the workplace, it feels good. It feels great. I want more of that feeling for myself and for other people, and I want to scale it. That's why there's a podcast. That's why I launched my business as a feedback coach, and that's why I'm chasing my passion. So when I get stuck, I go back into that feeling. When I coached that one person, it feels great when they clicked it, when they understood it. And I'm reminding myself that I'm working towards that feeling, emotional state in the future. I'm scaling it. And that lesson today, that failure, gets me closer to scale that feeling. For some reason, when I think about the emotional impact on it, not on the tangible goals. Now, don't get me wrong, tangible goals are important. That's not how I work. I need chaos. I need chaos. I need more flexibility. I need lots of pressure. I don't operate very well in strict, organized goals. But that's me. This means it's going to work for you as well. So you may have your goals when you set yourself, I want to have 100 subscribers, 200 subscribers, 1,000 subscribers. Great. Those are important goals. What was really powerful for me and really good is I go back in a feeling when it felt great when I had my first 10 subscribers, for instance. And that lessons with that particular experience helps me have and experience more of that feeling what I had in the past and scale it. It felt great to coach that person. So now I want to scale it. You know, John is in here, Miguel is in here. I can see Raquel also there as well. I all work with you guys at some point and I crossed my path with you. And I hope I delivered some value for you. I felt like I helped you just a bit. And it felt great, good. It's incredible for me. So when I fail, I immediately go, right, what's the lesson here so I can experience more of that in the future, more frequently at a bigger scale. So thinking about the emotional impact and then why do things and how it felt like, it's quite powerful because it helps you focus on the lessons rather than just on I'm not there yet, I'm not good enough, I'm doing it because I want to be a coach. That's quite abstract, I think. And it's kind of like, for me, it's not strong enough goal and a reason to do that. There are so many barriers, so many challenges that we're just getting hit and bombarded by, that thinking, right, the reason why I'm learning right here and right now and improve because I want to be a coach or I want to be a podcast host, it's not emotionally strong enough. I'm not invested in it as strongly as if I said to myself, right, this lessons here and now helps me to experience more of the feeling when I coached that one person in the past. And for that reason, I'm reframing the failure into the lesson, and I've got this additional fuel, energy to go after what's important for me because I want more of that feeling when I help that one person and contributed just a little bit to their life. So yes, setting goals is important and say, hey, I want to have 10,000 followers, I want to have 5,000 followers. Look, I want to speak in front of 10,000 people. And I park that goal. I don't think about it too much because that number can be detrimental to my focus. Because if for a year, just imagine, I want to speak in front of 10,000 people and COVID happens. And I don't know when I will do that in the future. If I keep on stay focused on the goal of, hey, Andrea, stay focused on the goal of speaking in front of 10,000 people and it doesn't happen, it just still didn't happen, I may start questioning myself. Instead, what I do, I flip it and I say, right, when I spoke in front of few people, that's how I felt. Now when I deliver this live stream, that's how I feel. And I need to work harder so I experience this emotion more frequently. And as I do, I grow as a speaker. So when it's a game time and the opportunity arises, I'm already there. So I spoke about the coaching playground concept, right? How do you connect to your daily tasks today that will get you to the future you that is linked to your cause, to your purpose? Okay, so the overarching goal is I want to humanize feedback conversations globally. That's this big audacious goal. I don't know when it happens. It's huge. It's great. It's my Goliath, and I'm just a David. I'm the underdog, and I'm comfortable with it. But how do I work towards that goal moving forward? I use every experience to get there, to get that feeling of being there. When I speak to my kids, I use it as a practice tool for myself as well. Okay. When I edit my videos and my audio, in some shape or form, it's a practice of being a better public speaker in the future. If only to get comfortable with my failures and how many times I've used, I can practice my mind as I'm editing my audio, which gets me closer to my future goals. So that's really, guys, really important. Okay. Now, my question for you is, as we are talking about having this athlete-like mindset, here's my question for you guys. What are you working on right now? Part of having athlete-like mindset to me, and what I do when I also coach managers around it, is to show you that, and to show for myself that we are often not as deliberate with our personal development as we think we are or as we should. We have these great audacious goals, and I admire you for having them. And they can be to be the best possible parent, or the next CEO, or the great public speaker, whatever those goals are, you got to work on yourself, right? But we are so busy on personal development that we're working on things like, I want to be a better speaker. I want to be more comfortable in front of camera. I want to be a better listener. It's very vague. It's huge. My question to you is, my advice is pick up one thing that is very specific and work on it. I always talk about this example of when we were kids, probably by age of 15, we played enough hours of football as a professional football player right now. Or we spent enough time doing some sort of activity as a professional is doing right now. The difference between me and professional football player today is, yes, we've spent the same amount of hours kicking the ball, but I'm not in Premier League earning £100,000 a week, right? Because I was just kicking the ball and somehow getting better through it. A professional athlete comes in and practices and hones one skill at a time and is always focused on that. So how do I use it on my personal example? And that also helps me to develop this growth mindset. And I'm using that growth mindset and I'm tapping it into the whole process as well, is that I always set myself a goal for a whole year that I'm working on. So high performing mindset is one. That may sound slightly abstract, but then I'm looking at, how do I ask myself questions? What do I think before every single podcast interview? What do I think and how I feel before every single live stream, which is my coaching playground, opportunity to get better? Even as a parent, I can get better through live streams because it helps me learn something about myself, my self-awareness, for instance. Okay? So you can see how you can start linking different goals with different things that you're doing that seems like a daily mundane task. Sending emails is another one. In my last episode that I've released with David Market, I spoke about the example how I messaged his personal assistant with an email complimenting her, sharing positive feedback, in other words. I've wrote this email and I realized this is not done to the best possible way. I'm not actually doing what I'm preaching. So I've raised it and rewritten it again to make it more meaningful and impactful. But here's the thing. At that particular time, I practiced positive feedback through sending an email. Right? That's how we need to look at our own daily tasks and routines with that athlete-like mindset to get the best out of the day, rather than saying, I'm busy, I don't have time to think, or you only sit with yourself once a month and think about your goals, and you have a feedback conversations with your manager or with your friends, with your mentor, coach, whoever that is. You can really bring it down and have something on the back of every single day. So if I go back to the example that I've used with the account, and right at the beginning of the episode, I've said his book wrongly, okay? I've explained why it didn't stress me out anymore, but here's how I used it to learn from it. At the end of the episode, I stayed curious with myself. So again, back to growth mindset, back to thinking about what some people may seem failures, but the moments when you haven't delivered the best possible outcome, how you really wanted it, right? Rather than thinking, that was bad, that was really bad of me, what he thinks about me, I wasn't a good host, I wasn't that. It wasn't even part of my thinking. That for a split second, my default response was, okay, at the beginning of the interview, I've made a mistake. What led to that mistake so it doesn't happen again? And I stayed curious with myself. I broke it down why, and I've realized that I set up myself two audacious goals, that they were too ambitious considering my current skill level in terms of using the Black Swan methodology and asking questions that hosted negotiators would ask. But I challenged myself to use it during that conversation with him and match his level. I didn't have enough time to prepare for it, so I got a little bit overwhelmed with my goals. So there is lesson learned here. And as you can see, rather than thinking about myself, what a mistake, what a failure, I bombed it, I wasn't the best possible host, I look at it, okay, what led to the fact that first 2 minutes, I felt overwhelmed and a little bit stressed? Yes, Andrea, deliberately practicing and consistently, every single day, a little bit by a little bit, to small things, small moments that will not only help you get better, but you can also practice your storytelling with those small things, and then you can scale it on macro. That's at least, it definitely works for me. Every email that I send, every video that I record, every live stream that I do, I look at everything and what did I learn, one thing or two that is linked to the future me. Because it's hugely important for me, and I believe for you guys as well. So all that, I'm about to answer Oliver's question, but to wrap it up, guys, my athlete-like mindset and the growth mindset and the storytelling that I'm using with every single experience helps me being that excited person who's always facing challenges with excitement and smile on my face, because I see them every single time as an opportunity to learn. And the reason why it's not overwhelming for me and it's worthwhile doing is because I'm not focused and obsessed on those tangible goals, if you will. They exist, of course, it's important. I've got family to feed, there's so many things that I could set it up. But I always go back into this emotional state that I'm doing it because I want more of that feeling when I coach that one single person and it felt great. I want to scale it. I want it more often that. And so when I think about my failures, when I think about my mistakes, I think, wow, okay, what can I learn from this experience so I can move closer to that point, that moment? A form of deep practice, one part of a time, over and over. Yes, Andrea, spot on. It's very deep practice, very deliberate. That's why I like to view it and frame it in a way that athletes do, right? Athlete shows for his practice, and he does that one or two skills over and over for an hour and a half. And when we look at managers in workplaces, a lot of them saying, hey, I've got 5 years experience. And unfortunately, they don't. They have 1 year experience repeated 5 times because they somehow getting better as a manager through going with it. If you practice just one thing, look, here's another example that I've done. When I worked as a waiter in hospitality, I decided for months to practice my eye contact. That's all I did. And there's this one trick. If you want to have a better eye contact, like really this magnetic, we've all met those people. When you talk to them, they seem like they're with you, and there is something magnetic in the way they look at us, and they will connect with us. See, one of the tricks is to notice people the retina color. So I said to myself, when I am working as a waiter, rather than just working as a waiter and doing my job, for myself, I'll practice that eye contact. And I'll be noticing this, the color. You can do the same thing when you go to the shop. And when you say thank you to the person at the cashier. Set this one only that for the next 3 months as you're going to the shop. That's all you have to do. That's, to me, that sort of deep practice and being very deliberate that you've mentioned about it also, Andrea. That's what it means to me. And that's how I get better as an individual. I pick one thing, small thing, but I practice it relentlessly. I noticed 2 days ago, I was with my wife at shop, and I noticed this thing again. I noticed it again. A lot of people are serving you or giving this back or giving the money back. They say thank you, but they're not even looking at you. There is no eye contact here. They're missing the opportunity because I'm sure they want to be those authentic people. They want to build this connection and with other people and being this enthusiastic person, right? Or they want to be able to convey the message in a certain way. That means you have to be comfortable with eye contact and really be aware about it. Here's your practice. If you're working as a cashier, that's okay. Practice it every time you give someone change. Look in the eyes and really say thank you. Especially now with the masks, it's hard to say whether you smile or not. The real smile, he's here, right? Practice that. Really accentuating how you're smiling, that people can see through your eyes. So when you take the mask off, when the COVID is gone, your smile will be the most authentic and genuine that it can only be through practicing that. And then as a public speaker, for instance, if you want to be, again, the same skill apply, right? If you do live streams, the same skill applies. So that's how I tend to practice. And for me, also that athlete-like mindset is a way of paying forward. And here's the thing, guys. Now, if you're running your own business, building your own business, you're the manager, you want to grow as a manager, possibly you want to have a mentor. And ideally, you want to have a mentor. And here's the thing. Unfortunately, we're not always that lucky to have one. And when we have, we tend to think, so how do I pay forward that person? How do I repay if I'm not as good as that person is? Right. Number one, don't think that way, that you're not as good as he or she is. So I've got Teresa just commenting here, and Teresa is exceptionally good emotional intelligence coach. I've got Andrea here. Andrea is hugely experienced in the world of coaching and growth mindset. They are levels above me in that respecting fields. Now, do I feel like they're better than me and I can't help them? No. Why? Because I'm not focused on that particular skill which they're helping me with. There is a reason why they're mentoring me and helping me with it, because I'm not able to do that yet. But there are other things that I'm good at that I can help them with. So my ways of practicing growth mindset and developing this athlete-like mindset, the intensity of growth and curiosity, is that I'm quite contagious. You don't get to be complacent with me. If you bring me to your team or we're building one-on-one relationship, you don't get to get complacent with me. It's impossible. I'm always focused on growth, because I believe the more we grow as individuals, the more we can pay forward and the more we can contribute to the society. So you don't get to be complacent with me. So my ways of paying back is I may not be able to help you in that field, but I'll push you hard, I'll challenge you, and we will grow together. Perhaps your years into your management career and you're a little bit complacent by now because the environment isn't as challenging to you. You've done it the same thing for years now, different reasons. And we all have been there. Your team doesn't challenge you the way you need and want. You see, if I'm there, at the very least, I can bring that excitement, that energy back to you. So if somebody decides to mentor me or help me with something, my ways of paying it forward is to that athlete-like mindset. I'm going to work so hard and I'll be so curious that you will remember how it was when you were in the same stage, and that reignites it. That's one ways in which I tend to pay things forward. Now I have 2 comments or questions. Thank you, Andrea. You see, Andrea, I truly appreciate that comment, and I definitely see you being miles ahead of me in so many aspects. I don't have experience in so many facets that you do, but you helping me certain things and broadening my point of view. My ways of paying for it is at least to be that force, that excitement force behind it, and help you and help others look at things from different perspectives. And my perspective is different than everyone else, because my life is different than everyone else, and your life is different than mine. I'm an athlete, work in hospitality, etc., etc. Yours is different. So I'm bringing that different light as well. So thank you, Andrea, for letting me know. I appreciate that. It makes my day. Reminding people they have survived 100% of their failures, mistakes, bad days opens the opportunity for them to look at how. Yes, we all have failed. We all have, and you know what? We all bounced back. We're here, right? But it's the reframing of it. Is what led you to it? What was the story? What's the storytelling in your mind? As you always say, Teresa, as well, the storytelling that we have, right? I love that. Focus on the thing to master, then add the next layer. What would you say? One thing at a time provides as a pro and as con. So one thing at a time provides as pro as a con, Teresa, in my opinion. I tend to apply one thing at a time, but I would have a few areas of that one thing at a time and a different intensity. So rather than saying, I want to be the best public speaker, Teresa, and say, well, I need to work on facial expression, pace of my talk, pauses, filler words, body language. It's overwhelming. It's too much. It's just too much. So the pros of adding one thing is because you can see it, you can focus more deliberately, and you can see the progress clearer and faster. Therefore, you're more motivated to keep on moving forward. The con to that is that it creates a situation where your journey seems to be long. And if it took me only 3 months to master that one thing, and to be like Simon Sinek, I'm using this as an example, my Goliath, and to be like Simon Sinek, I have to do 25 more things. Does that mean I'll be there in 10 years' time? So that's the con that you have to learn and balance out. For me, accepting that I'm playing long game, it's a marathon. That's number one. And number two, that mastery takes time. It genuinely takes time. And number three, it works for me. It may not have worked for everyone else, but I'm comfortable with setting myself a goal without a deadline. if you will, as much as others tend to do. Like I've mentioned earlier, I love chaos. I need chaos. I perform best at that time, those times. It has its drawbacks as well. It's not the best strategy. Sometimes it bites me. It kicks back. But for me, I'm comfortable with, look, like 2 years ago, I said to myself, I'm going to give myself a month to stop asking why, start asking how questions and what. I didn't set this expectation of saying, hey, in 2 months' time or month time, I want to get rid of it. It's unrealistic, and those expectations can get in your way. You know, I'll spend a month on mastering that one thing. But if you're mastering one thing, you know what difference does it make? Think about the best coaches, mentor-like leaders. Think about people that you resonate with and you look up to. They have one or two features that they mastered. They're really good at it. Imagine just mastering posing as you speak. Spend 6 months posing as you speak. And the impact that you will have for the next 20 years, people will be like, wow, how did you manage to pose? I can keep on talking and talking. I don't know how you've done it. So that's one small thing that you can focus on, posing. Do it for 6 months. And then you have a lifetime, almost a decades of using it and being that role example, that inspirational person around that one thing. Eye contact and others as a simple thing. So those are my pros and cons that I believe, Teresa. And I'm a great fan of having one thing and working on. It doesn't mean that I don't work on other things meanwhile, but there's one thing that I am obsessed with and I'm mainly focused on. So for me, I set myself goals on annual scale. Last year was all about storytelling, collecting stories, creating metaphors, getting better at them, looking for them, connecting them with my lessons during my workshops. A whole year dedicated to it. It seems like a long time, but it's a year worth spending. This year, here are my focuses for this year, whole 2021. Number one, what's the signal that I'm sending? People resonate with a strong signal. I want to be deliberate with a signal that I'm sending to people when I'm showing up. Okay, so that means I have to focus on my personal development and be really specific with it. So that's one thing. High performance mindset is another thing. How I showing up into highly challenging situations, i.e. life interviews. The stories that I'm telling myself, how I park away one goals and focus on the best possible performance in the real time. That's two. And the third one is still around questions. I still ask binary questions. I need to be more open-ended questions and take it to the next level around Black Swan methodology and asking questions, mirroring and labeling as well. So those are the few things that I'll be focusing for the whole year. Meanwhile, as well, other bits will join in. But I'm okay with having 2-3 goals for the whole year. But also there is one more thing, guys, before I wrap up. Having those goals clarified, and this is what I need to work on, helps you request feedback more efficiently and get the right feedback more efficiently. Because just imagine if you decided that as a speaker, you're going to work on pauses. I'll just use that one. Or pace of your talk, or metaphors, or having metaphors clearly phrased, or even as simple as eradicating the sentence. Now we tend to do that. We tend to say it. Or as a good friend of mine, when he was communicating a lot, and I know he's a really intelligent person, and he really nails his points and presentations, he tends to use this kinda word. So it's kind of like, which made him sound like not confident enough and diminishing the impact of it. On average, every 8 seconds he would use that. Every 8 bloody seconds. I counted it, I let him know, and imagine now you picking up this as a goal. And you go and present it to your team, or you present it to your client, and you say, hey, there is one thing that I'm working on right now, and it's that particular sentence, that particular phrase. Let me know how often I've used it. Or if you have someone like me on the team, I'm just sitting there listening, and I'm got a pen in my hand, and I'm counting them. Bam, 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 bam. That's my level of intensity of personal development. And I'm not doing it with everyone, because not everyone is willing and ready to receive such a detailed feedback, because it might be overwhelming. Without having that growth mindset and good relationship, if I came and told you, dude, every 8 seconds you've used or every 8 seconds you've used kind of, that's not good enough. It's not really what we want, right? But that's why I like having that one thing, a particular thing to do, because there are years and decades in front of us, guys, of using a particular skill, master it, and move to the next one. And the beauty of that also is pick up that one skill that then can be used everywhere. When you talk to your kids, when you talk to your spouse, when you present in front of your team, when you present with your client, when you're using it in a sticky situation in your personal life or something happened. Don't know, pick up one. But you see, by understanding that I only work one, but it has such an influence all over that it's worthwhile spending my time with. Okay, there was one more question that I forgot to answer. What would you say is the best way to communicate with others who experience failures but don't necessarily have this yet positive mentality? First of all, Oliver, I would suggest listening to the episode with Andrea. She touched on that one really well and used curiosity as a counterbalance. This is a quite challenging question, and you can't answer it with one go and in a smaller go. Curiosity, staying curious with that person, is really, really important. But how you from the feedback perspective, how you present it is really important. You have to think about the relationship that you have with the person already. Are you that role example? Have you experienced something similar like that person? Can they relate to you in the past as well, that you're okay with failures and sharing them openly with everyone else? That's one thing. So if you have people like that around you, start with modeling yourself. Start with being comfortable with criticizing yourself in front of others, admitting to your failures, and showing that failure is a natural part of growth. Because when you do that on your part, and when it's your time to challenge that person and share it, it's easier. You've built that trust in between the relationship. That makes it a little bit easier already. I also work with people that it's so hard to explain, and they're so fixed on their failures and that fixed mindset that it was puzzling to me in the past how that can be. If it's a strong situation, perhaps better idea is to look for other experiences and examples when we've done something similar and show them, like Teresa mentioned, how they overcome that. So they see the path. It's very often what I have with my son, actually. He sees one failure, the younger one, Xavier. He sees one failure and he just doesn't understand if I have a conversation with him. And if I ask him certain question, he doesn't see the pattern. So I have to take him back into the example in the past when he's done similar thing. And I would have a question with, you've played a video game, you've played that game, and I'm quite specific, and you couldn't go through this level. What have you done to overcome it? And he just verbalizes it. And I'm going to take him back to this example here. So that's one of the things you can really say. But saying out loud that they're wrong and they see it wrongly won't help. You have to start painting the picture for them and connecting the dots with their examples when they've done it well and delivered it well. So that would be my advice, Oliver. And also, my friend, we're having conversations offline as well. I'm more than happy to expand for you. Okay, guys, so that's it for me today. It's been an hour. What an hour. Thank you very much for all those questions. I really, really appreciate them. They also bring extra dynamic to the conversation, guys. So, guys, I appreciate you for showing up, and I appreciate you for asking those questions. I hope I have delivered the value for you, and I appreciate them because they help me think differently as well. I like this fact of not being prepared for it and being asked the questions that I may not have answers for yet, or full answers just yet, guys. So thank you very much for that. Next week and next session, haven't decided on the topic yet. If you have an idea around feedback conversations, let me know. Right now, I'm towards the topic of the most common mistakes that we tend to do during feedback conversations. So more likely that will be the topic for the next week. I'm not sure if it will. I'll decide the next day or two if there are no other ideas, and I'll announce it. Definitely, I'll be back here next week, 2:30 p.m. GMT time, 9:30 EST time, guys. Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook. No interviews this week so far for my podcast, so no live streams. I do have some exciting guys coming up. One of those is Kim Scott is coming back for a second interview with me. First one was about the radical candor. But Kim is launching her new book in March. So March, I believe 22nd. Me and Kim are going live about her latest book, which is called Just Work, Get Shit Done Fast and Fair. It's about injustice in the workplace. So that's one conversation, and David Burkus is next one. Before that, David Burkus about remote working, guys. So those are the two next interviews, but I've got a list of exciting names to invite next week. Hopefully they say yes, and we can have more exciting topics to be discussed. Thanks a lot, Teresa. Thanks a lot, Oliver. Andrea, thanks for tuning in, guys. Have a great Sunday on purpose.